Happy Veterans Day to those that served and all along those lines. It is Veterans Day. And of course, here in Durham, North Carolina, we're dealing with the remnants of that tropical storm. That's right. There was just a little bit of a torrential downpour that was going on a minute ago and all in that space. And of course, it'll be heading to other parts of the East Coast as well. So that's one of the things that was taking place on this particular day. And I'm sure that there are other news things going on, including some of the things that are taking place as far as politics. And of course, there are a couple of runoffs that are going on, and folks are trying to figure out what brought people out to the polls and what issues were definitely on their mind. As we've been talking about here, a lot of people were wondering about the economy, and the economy definitely did have an impact on some of the folks' decisions in who they voted for and why they voted, and all in that space. But there were also things that were a part of that folks might not have been expected, because apparently hiking taxes, protecting abortion, and other things were reasons that folks gave for their own personal votes, and all in that kind of way. And like I said, it does look like Georgia is heading to a runoff between Warnock and Walker, and it does look like there are some other things that are going on in that space. The AP has called the Oregon governor race for Tina Kotic. So that is considered a progressive in the political lanes and all in that way. But definitely we'll see what happens in that regards, and if that stays up or does not stay up in that case. And of course, Biden, as he's over there at the climate conference and all of that, he is saying that he is going to tighten methane emission rules, and definitely is going to have a push for more oil. So me and Lee may talk about that. We may be talking about some other things going on as well, because definitely there's a lot of things happening in the news and around the world, and we might see who else pops up as well. I'm not sure if he's expecting Nicole to get up that far, that being the tropical storm, or not, but we'll find out in that space and see what some of the other things that are going on in the world. And it sounds like I've got at least one other person that has popped in here also for the conversation. So we're going to see all of these different things that are going on. And like I said, waves of heavy rain were expected throughout the day in South Carolina as the remnants of Nicole moves through that general area and all in that space. So we're going to see what folks have got to say about a number of these things that I'm talking about, including that war that is continuing to go on in Russia and Ukraine. It does look like a Texas court has blocked Biden's student loan forgiveness policy, and there might be a couple of other news items that we'll get to as well. So as I'm going through here, seeing that some of the things that are of interest to the world and of interest to us here in the Durham area, but not just the Durham area, but globally as well. So we're going to see what folks have got to say about a number of these stories. So I'm going to bring in whoever I've got here with me, and it looks like it's definitely Dr. Dan Worthington and Lee Newton Rhodes. So I've got both of them here. Always glad to have these great friends of mine here to talk about what's going on in the world and some of their thoughts about a number of the things that are happening globally and all in that space. So I guess I'll start off with both of you. First off, how's things going? Because I just had a torrential downpour a minute ago here in Durham, but it has stopped at least for now. But who knows? There may be another one later on, and definitely I think it's sliding up the East Coast, so it might be heading your way as well, Lee. But it'll be interesting to see if it is a major storm or just maybe a light Peter by the time it gets to you. And the other news story that I was going to mention that I didn't get to was the fact that they are saying that Brittany Griner is actually heading and being transferred to a penal colony, according to the State Department. And Russia apparently failed to alert the U.S. of that transfer to the penal colony. And apparently, that is a truly horrific place that they are sending her to, and all along those lines. But definitely, we do wish the efforts to get her back home with success, and hopefully that'll happen. And the other thing that I saw that was just a interesting news of kind of like one of those trivia things, but it's still kind of interesting, is that we all remember the 1986 Challenger space shuttle crash, and apparently which was a very tragic day. I think I was actually working at a small newspaper at that particular day, and I don't know if you remember these, Lee, but you remember the teletypes and all in that space. That was actually how
Yeah,
it came across. Was the teletype had the imagery as well as some
for
of the
sure.
reporting that was going on as I was just fresh out of college at that time. Well, yeah, because I graduated in the December of '84, so it was like a year and a half later that that happened. But they did find a piece of that Challenger space shuttle off of the Florida coast. So that is something that they were uh, apparently they were doing some underwater kind of research and stuff, and they
They're
did.
looking for a plane.
Hmm? What'd you say,
They're looking
Dan?
for an airplane, and they
Looking
discovered
for a
that.
new plane? Gotcha.
Yeah.
When they
And by
did.
accident, they found. Yeah, I just want to interrupt you for a minute, Mark, and just acknowledge today being Veterans Day, and we give
I
thanks
did
to all
do
the
that at the
veterans.
beginning, but definitely I want y'all to acknowledge it as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. What are your reflections on the veterans? Like I said, my dad served in the Air Force back in the early 60s and all in that space. I actually spent some time in Turkey. I have relatives, including a dear cousin that are veterans. One of them is made it up to, I believe, lieutenant colonel. With the time that he retired, never got to the full the full rank that he wanted, but he did retire and is still doing military consulting. And I have some other relatives that served in the military and friends and acquaintances, and definitely have a number of veteran friends. As a matter of fact, I'll be doing a veterans event this weekend because I think I've told y'all before that we do the Road to the Apollo, which is actually came out of a concern for veterans' rights and veterans' issues. Captain Newborn, that is his actual first name. It is not a rank of his and all of that. That is actually his first name, and I believe it was the first name of his dad. But he is an advocate for the veterans. So we've been doing this, I think, for 10 years, and this time we'll be in Dublin, North Carolina, and doing that on Sunday afternoon. So it's still a typical talent competition, but the backdrop is around veterans issues and veterans rights. And so we do mention that several times. And of course, there are efforts to recognize the veterans, have the veterans stand up, and the captain comes out and talks about some of the issues that he is concerned about with the way veterans are treated and all in that space. So definitely some ties to the veterans that I have, but I'd love to hear your own reflections about veterans and the importance of veterans to society.
Dan, you want to go first, or should I?
Go ahead. I served. I have some thoughts, but go ahead.
I wasn't aware. Thank you for your service. I did not serve. I was born in '58, so I was like in between the mandatory draft and those that had needed not to be drafted, but the volunteer army, volunteer military. So I fell in between those years, and also I didn't experience the Vietnam, but I was alive during that period of time, which was a horrible time for those who did serve, or the way they were mistreated when they came back from overseas. And I think even now, veterans are not appreciated for the sacrifices that they give in terms of separating from the family and just serving for the country. And also that they're volunteering to do this. They're not being drafted, and the sacrifices they give to the chunk out of their lives to put their lives online. And were it not for the military, we would not be here as the country we are. And I don't think a lot of people might, appreciate that. The freedoms that we have is because of them. Whether it's World War I, World War II, the Civil War, I include that also. But even the Revolutionary War and the War of Independence.
Amen.
Yeah, definitely. Your thoughts, Dan? You did serve. Like I said, I did
You
not
know,
serve.
it's interesting. A lot of people in this country don't have an appreciation for the cost of our freedom and for the lives and sacrifice and blood that's been sacrificed to protect our liberty and the freedom and liberty of the world. Really, we hadn't intervened in World War II, for example, or in
We
World
speak
War I.
German now.
Well, we would be dominated. The world would be, and our country wouldn't exist as it does today. And that took the bravery of many good men and women to go and fight for our freedom. I started in the military back in the mid 90s. I was at the United States 70s, sorry, United States Military Academy at West Point, and it was at the end of the Vietnam War, and there was a lot of morale issues because of the disdain for the military. It didn't dissuade me from serving because I knew of the importance of that work, and so I got my commission, finished my commission at Brigham Young University, and went on active duty, and served a number of years on active duty, and then went to Palace Chase. They call it Palace Chase, to get my law degree, and continued to serve in the Air Force as a information systems communications engineering person, and so I had my fair share of traveling at nights in places that I never checked my passport, to say the least. And my final mission, many people didn't make it back from. So it is this day is a day of reflection and survivor's remorse, really. You know, the military has been so politicized now that we may come to a point where we can't be effective because of the way the military is being used, and made sure they're not as ready for battle because they're focusing on issues that don't really apply to their central core mission, which is to defend the Constitution of the United States and with their lives and their prowess. We've been doing a lot of things that will affect that mission readiness that are just absolutely stupid and ridiculous from a military readiness standpoint. That I'm disappointed in, and that's the politicians on the politicians. But you know, our history is that we go in, we defend countries. When we get out, we don't what's the word? Annex them to our country. We don't take control. We don't take their resources. We don't do that. You know, many occupiers and those who are victorious over countries do that. They take over. It's their country. They won the war. We don't do that as a nation. In our past, we've had to we've conquered lands that were inhabited by indigenous peoples, and those were people died, and our people died, their people died to build this country. But we don't have that habit of using our military to conquer and to take over countries. We do it to try to protect the freedom and democracy and human rights of people around the world, and that's admirable.
Definitely very.
I'm sorry, Mark. There's a term you used that I wasn't familiar with: survivor's remorse. I've heard of survivor's guilt. Is that just the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've definitely.
Even though there's great sorrow and trauma and the memories that never go away, and war is ugly and bloody and grotesque, and but that's the way it's always been. In fact, in prior centuries, it was worse when they were using swords and everything else. I don't know if it's any more humane to get killed the way we die now, but it's real life and death, and that's done so that people can have the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and can protest against the government if they want to in constructive ways and not violent ways, because that's criminal. And so, I mean, that's what it's all about. That's why we have our freedom, freedom of expressions, freedom of religion, all that.
I just want to piggyback. Go on, Dan. Oh, no, I just want to say something.
With that freedom comes responsibility. And there's the pillars of freedom, the 5 pillars of freedom, have always been inextricably combined or connected to responsibilities. And that's what many of the youth and many of the people in this country fail to realize, fail to accept those responsibilities, and failed to do their very best to contribute to the welfare of their families and for the welfare of the country. Instead, they choose to denigrate, degrade, tear down, and talk badly about our country when we are a land of opportunity. We perfect? No. Is there room for improvement? Yes. But we're still the land chosen and set apart to be a land of opportunity. And people need to remember that and appreciate that. And they may be going through personal struggles or hard times, and I realize that. I've been through many myself, but that's life. I thank God every day that I'm in this nation and not somewhere else. When you think about it, even the people who are in the most meager circumstances in our country have it better than most anybody else in the world, except maybe Europe. And people struggle, and the world is developing and improving, and the standard of living is improving in most places around the world. But there's always been, people always want to come to the United States. I want to be here, but in doing that, we need to also preserve the nature of who we are and what our values are, and those things that are most important to being a strong, God-fearing nation, one nation under God, indivisible. And we're so divided now because, number one, we've forgotten God as a people. People are less faithful. And number two, we're divided over what liberty and freedom really means, what the Constitution really means, what those constitutional values are. And, the left wants to reinvent it one way, the right wants to keep it pretty much the way it was intended. And, so that's the struggle, preserving liberty and preserving our way of life, and preventing others from distorting and keeping and making it something it was never intended to be.
Thank you for sharing.
We were actually mentioning and getting people's reflections on veterans, and I know that while it was a different part of the world, that you also served, Sasha, and definitely you were serving there in Russia. So I'd love to hear your thoughts just around veterans and veterans' rights. It is Veterans Day, so that's kind of what we were doing at this particular time. So any thoughts that you have and that you want to reflect on the veterans?
Let me start with the fact that my late father ended the war in 1945.
Can't hear,
I
Sasha.
can hear. I can hear.
Can
Okay.
you hear me? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
now.
I can
Yes,
hear
yes,
you.
Okay, I would like to mention first that my late father ended the war in Berlin in 1945. And we left Soviet Union in 1975, moved to Canada. All what I can say is that there is no respect to veterans of the Second World War at all. Most of the people who are in Russia, they are trying to just exist, to just find ways to feed themselves, and even that is not always possible. All of them were promised long time ago that they would have their apartments, the government build or so on. Nothing happened at all, as they're slowly dying. And well, in a few years, obviously there will be no alive veterans left in Russia of Second World War, and their fate is really horrible. There is no other words really I can use. But this is how Russia is treating all other people just as well, all their citizens. There is no much difference, except that the people who are younger, they can leave Russia and just move abroad and find meaningful existence there. Now the veterans who were in their 80s, but most likely 90s or so on, obviously these people were not in a position to move anywhere, and they were just all dying a very indignified death. Sorry to say that, and it's a horrible feelings, and nobody is guilty other than the present government of Russia with Putin as his head.
I'm sorry, Sasha, can you speak for a minute about, you live in Canada now, how the military there is respected or not by the citizenship?
Of course, yes. In Canada, not only military, it's the police, all government structures are respected in Canada, and people here, unlike in US, they don't have the sense of necessary protests, with exceptions. For example, like trucking protests a few months ago. Of course, that's exceptions, and that's why they were talking about it so much, because it's rather very unusual. But all the situation is unusual because of the COVID and because of they had to derive their living. So this is a very unclear situation, to say the least, on both parts. Now, Trudeau government eventually squashed that movement, at least at that time. And largely he was supported by people, not because they're against truckers, but because there were a lot of undue disorder, at least in Ottawa, in the capital of Canada. There was a disorder. People couldn't not only travel, but even to go from street to street or drive the cars normally. Actually, it touched a little bit even Toronto, because a few trucks came to Toronto to ignite the protest here. And one day I had to go to my medical appointment, and all of a sudden what's normally taking 10 minutes drive took me 45 minutes drive, just a few blocks down the street, because it was blocked by trucks, and so people couldn't move anywhere. And so you might as well feel that they do have the point, but when it starts hitting you directly and you cannot go to your medical appointment, and you miss, and then you're slapped for non-show with $100, which you have to then explain that it's not your fault really, because that's what happened, or so on. It's not making things right for some reason. Right, but again, it is extraordinary. It is unusual situation, so hopefully it will not be repeated.
Dan and Lee, you both mentioned it, and I've heard different people say different things about it. But a lot of folks that are veterans, and I guess it would be the same even for those that are fighting over there in Russia and Ukraine, oftentimes talk about that remorse that comes when you're involved in such a horrible thing, the death and destruction that goes on with war. That is definitely the main part of what wars are all about. But do you think that we as a nation or as a world do enough to address the mental strain that folks come when they come back? Because I've heard a lot of horror stories about people that are facing the whole post-traumatic syndrome and some of the other things that go on even when they try to get back into the workforce and back into society. in general. And like I said, I don't have any direct experience, even though I did work with somebody that was in that space, meaning that they definitely had those kind of attacks when I was working at a construction management company several years back and all in that space. But I was just wondering, do you feel that enough is being done to help veterans adjust to society? Dan, Lee, anybody?
I think the VA has always been underfunded, not well ran. It was very hard to get appointments. There was some corruption and mismanagement, spending, that kind of thing. And a lot of that has to do with the way the politics of the VA and the infighting in the VA administration, and also the way Congress chooses to fund and treat veterans, and the limits and stuff's been placed on the types of care, them denying claims for chemical exposures and fire pit exposures and other things for years before finally admitting, well, maybe we were wrong about that. Meanwhile, people suffered with those symptoms and that affected their life and their ability to get work and other things for years without the government taking responsibility for that disability, because the veteran received that damage at war. And so, it's atrocious on one level, because if someone was injured serving our country and in war, we have a responsibility to take care of them. And when we don't, we fall down.
Dan?
Yeah.
Can you speak to why we have the VA system, medical system, versus just the military using private medical like most people do? Why does it exist?
Yeah, no. And, the thing is, a lot of veterans that retire have TRICARE, and it's like a private insurance policy, right? You can go other places and get care and not have to use the VA.
That's what my father-in-law did. He went outside the system when he could.
Yeah, and that's what many do, because it doesn't work. Some people don't have the choice because of financial circumstances or other things, right? They've got to go to a veterans hospital or whatever and go through the system.
I'm sorry, you said they don't have a choice because their benefits don't allow them to go outside the system?
Or they can't afford it.
Why would their benefits not pay for? I'm confused.
Well, I mean, it does, but it's like private insurance. There are deductibles and other things and cost out of pocket.
They avoid by staying in the VA. I gotcha.
And so, like my uncle who died recently received triple bypass in the VA hospital in Salt Lake. That surgery would have been several $100,000, and with private insurance, it would have been very, very prohibitive. Now he didn't. He was a highly decorated veteran, and he served with the military for all of his life. But he served on active duty only 10, 12 years. So in that case, he didn't have TRICARE because he didn't retire, but he was a DoD helicopter pilot, instructor, and mechanic, and so he worked in Afghanistan and all over the world doing that during his life. And when he came home, he bought a house for his mom and stayed with her and took care of her. And he had saved his money. And after grandma died, his life, he got in an accident and his life fell apart. And he died recently. And he what he had to all of his nieces and nephews. And I honor him for his life, his sacrifices for not only his country, but also for his family, for his mother and his siblings. He had to bury 2 other brothers, one who had served in Vietnam and died leukemia, and one who developed MS and had complications and died. I have to go early because I have another meeting, but it's really been a privilege to talk to you on this Veterans Day.
Dan, one thing before you go, I just want to bring up the topic and then you can go. We're talking about the military, and I don't want to forget about those who are missing in action, which is a real thing for a lot of families.
Oh, yeah.
It's very sad because they don't have the closure. The people are just missing, and the families just suffer horribly, just not knowing.
Yes, and that is a serious problem. And there has been an effort to recover, for example, the remains of servicemen in Vietnam and other areas. Sometimes it's very difficult because there's people
injuries.
There's no pieces. I mean, there are pieces, or not, and it's and sometimes those are intermingled together because I'm not going to talk about it. It's and so so sometimes there's not much to bury.
Unfortunately.
No. Well, I have to go, but thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Dan. Again,
Thank you.
Take care. You have a nice day. Bye bye.
Y'all do the
Bye,
same.
Dan.
Appreciate you, Dan. So Dan's going to check out here and everything in terms of us talking and all in that space. I was actually ready to ask a couple of questions. One of them I'll save for later because I definitely want to hear Dan's answer to it and all in that space. But Sasha, I do know that I had mentioned it earlier that Ms. Griner, Brittany Griner, they're saying is going to one of these prison camps, and one of those prison camps that is in Russia, and it is definitely some advocacy groups like Russia Behind Bars that are saying that it could be some very harsh times that she is facing, and you definitely know about that part of the world. So what should people expect to hear from Brittany Griner? They're able to hear anything based on your knowledge of those kinds of camps and everything? Because everything I'm hearing is that there's going to be some very horrible kinds of conditions that she will face, especially since they have decided to put her in a penal colony that I guess were based on the Gulag system back in the day.
You know what? I wouldn't go as far as analyzing her terms and conditions in Gulag. It's all well known. She's basically kept there for a possible exchange for a Russian spy who will be caught or maybe already caught in the United States. So she's just a trading token, really, nothing else. So with all her sufferings, you feel sorry for her. On the other hand, she went there for her fortunes in basketball and playing for Russian league. Okay, it was her choice. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Looks like she's more a loser rather than a winner. But that's people are making their choices in life, and sometimes they're good choices, sometimes they're not so good choices. That's about it. There is nothing more, nothing less I can add to that.
Understood. Hey, switching topics once again, but another thing that's been very much in the United States news has been this whole concept of student loan forgiveness. I know a lot of people were.
I know you brought that up at the beginning.
But very much excited about the student loan forgiveness and all in that space. But definitely now the federal judge in Texas has blocked that student loan forgiveness, ruling that it goes beyond the authority of the education department and the power of the executive branch. So that's going to make it a major legal obstacle. So, Lee, I was just wondering, do you think that we should be continuing to try to get student loan forgiveness, try to adapt it in some kind of way, or is this something that we shouldn't be dealing with in the first place, and people just need to go ahead and pay their student debts and whatever they have accrued in that sense? I just wondering your thoughts around.
Well, yeah, I have a few thoughts on that, and I appreciate you asking me. One is these people who are at student loans, they signed on the dotted line. They took a loan, just like you take, whether a mortgage, a car loan, what have you, pay off the loan. And I don't understand the logic of forgiving them. They chose to get the major that they got, knowing whether it was marketable or not. So that's one issue. The other issue is in terms of Congress, there's a rule book called the Constitution, and they forget frequently that they're supposed to follow it. Where in there is there something about student loan forgiveness? I don't know. I guess that's what the federal judge is saying. Excuse me, but that's not your job. You don't have the authority to do that. I'm not an attorney and I don't know all the details, but I imagine that's part of it. But as private citizens, a lot of people chose to pay off the loans who went to college. A lot of people chose not to get them. A lot of people like me worked their way through college, and other people chose not to go to college. Why should they be picking up the bag for those people who did go, who some of them can't afford and some of them maybe can afford to pay off the loans, but why should they be picking up the other person's bill? I don't get it. And where's the authority that the federal government has to make us do that? And
like I said, I know that I personally took some grants and loans, and I'm still in the process, even these many years later, of paying them back. But definitely, because there was something that was probably needed to be paid sometime back in the time and all of that.
I don't know why the federal government isn't giving student loans. That to me makes no sense whatsoever. If you can't afford to go to college, either do work study program, which is what I do, or get scholarships from the universities themselves, which they do a lot of times for more merit, whether it's athletic or financial. Get it directly from the college. Why is the government in that business?
Well, I think the government's been in the business for a while, because I mean,
no, I know they have, but why? That's my question. Why?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I know the Pell Grants were established sometime back, like maybe back in could have been as early as the 60s or the 50s, but they've been out there for a number of years. And I think part of it was that during some hard recession times, they were probably trying to find a way to balance it and get people some college education that could not necessarily afford it, and they were probably trying to figure out a way to help them as a government entity. And then that's how the program.
I think anytime the government gets involved, whether it's education or housing, I don't think it ends up better for the citizens.
Yeah, because it can be interesting. I know that we mentioned housing, because a lot of the substandard housing, or what some people would consider like slum
rent control and subsidies,
set up by the government, and they're definitely government type housing, and even some of the Section 8 housing. But the Section 8 housing can actually sometimes be set up, like I know here in Durham, it's set up in downtown areas, and in some cases it can definitely help people in those spaces. So I think that it can be used as a positive force if it is properly administered. But I do agree with you that a lot of things are not properly administered, but they definitely have to work on their administration and all in that space. By the way, the federal government has said that if it was not blocked, some 43 million people would be eligible for student debt cancellation under the policy. And as of last week, November 3rd, 26 million people had already applied. So,
Sasha, in Canada, does the government give out student loans, or is it the universities themselves? The government?
No, government guarantees the loans, but it doesn't. It's not in financial services. So the university are procuring They have a elaborate system to evaluate the students and their marks and their previous achievements and so on. And based on that, they have a special system of granting certain and also financial condition of students and their families. So they have that, and I never heard about possible forgiveness of the loan, because based on what has to happen to if forgiveness.
In America, it's called buying votes.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
That's what.
Yeah, Just doesn't
Speaking of
make
buying
sense.
votes and everything, there is another major story that I'm sure is going to rock the world. But I think that Sasha, you probably predicted it sometime back, and I just want to get your take on it, and maybe Lee's got some takes as well. But apparently, earlier today or recently, the cryptocurrency sector is reeling because of FTX collapsing, and that is a digital currency exchange valued earlier this year at $32 billion and made famous by a Super Bowl ad starring comedian Larry David. But apparently, there's been some concerns about the instability of that particular platform, FTX, and that's definitely a platform where users were buying and selling crypto and all of that. And definitely, it looks like on Thursday they have headed toward being a like a dinosaur from the past, or something that was.
I mean, a lot of the crypto has been really getting crashed. Bitcoin was over 60,000 and it's below 20,000. And a lot of the other, the tech companies too. Facebook is taking a beating on its stock.
Yeah, but it's not related to crypto. Facebook.
Correct. That is true. That is true.
But I think they're starting to recover, at least Facebook. Now, the crypto, I just don't understand how easily the governments of all countries, and US in particular, even allowed crypto to be traded, to be in existence, because it's nothing but fraudulent instrument for people to hide their money, to go into some kind of a metaverse, to transfer their money wherever they want, and coming back to their world. I have to tell you that I have my own experience where some fraudsters committed me to transfer their money, but they wouldn't accept normal wire transfer. They wanted to have it only in crypto. Okay, so that's already a warning sign. But I'd like to amuse myself and to see how their traps and their way of communicating works really. So I just wanted to amuse myself a little. So I started to ask them that, look, they're located in UK. So I asked them, is there any bank in UK where I can just No, don't transfer the wires because it's too expensive, it's too complicated, and it's slow. Now with crypto, you're doing instantly or so on. Okay, so I opened the crypto account and I try a small amount just to see how it all works. First of all, it's way more expensive than the bank, because wire by the bank would cost me $55 on any amount. Say I want to transfer $50,000, you pay $55 for a wire, and that's it. The next day or two, your wire is arrived. Now with crypto, first of all, you have to buy crypto. To buy crypto, some of them are saying, we have no fee. You can buy crypto, no fee. Okay, but there is a spread, and they're hiding their fees and everything in the spread. So all of a sudden, you're losing money on spread right away. Then they have to verify your account. Because I wanted, ideally, I wanted to transfer that crypto that I purchased to another institution. Not so fast. Hold on. Have to verify your wire transfer. Where is it coming from? So normally whatever it takes a day or two takes 5, maybe 6 days, because they want to verify your financial institution. You have to explain where did you get the money and so on. Actually, they don't care where did you get the money. All they want is to sit on your money as long as possible. So finally, and they ask to proof of your address, so your telephone bill or something else. And you have to work really hard, because if you don't have your paper bill, so you have to make a screenshot and you have to say, so you have to basically unload all information about yourself, your address, your all particular things that only your bank would normally know. You have to disclose it to strangers. Okay, so you've done all that. Guess what? Then you give them direction where to transfer that Bitcoin. Well, after 2 days, they're coming back and say, no, we are not authorizing transfer to this entity. So I tried one more time. No. Okay, so then I figured out that, well, enough is enough. I need to withdraw my money. Do you know how much it take me to take my money back? Well, more than a month. They were saying that the correspondent bank could not verify address of your bank. It's a different address. Could you confirm that this address is right or not that right? And after, and I answered every their request.
I'm sorry, Sasha, this is Bitcoin?
Yes, Bitcoin, absolutely. It's a company.
Right.
Actually, it's a reputable, by the way, it's a reputable Canadian company with the office in downtown Toronto. So it's not.
I'm shocked because the public has the perception that it's fully liquid.
No.
And you're saying it's really not.
It's not liquid. There are very high barriers even to enter it, such as spread, where they're hiding all their fees
right.
and everything else. So eventually, after I purchased Bitcoin, I sold that, but I was very lucky that there were a couple of days when it moved a little bit higher. So I was able to sell Bitcoin at the profit, but all my profit and more was eaten by the spread. So,
by the spread.
Okay. Welcome to the crypto world. Now, the problem also is that I felt very angry that for well more than a month, my money, and I use to live in a world where my money is my money and I can do anything, whatever I see to be fit. All of a sudden, for more than a month, my money was no longer my money. It was now somebody else's money.
And a non-liquid asset.
They're assets, but they're not so liquid as I thought.
Right.
Because when I looked at their materials, because they're part of a public company or so on, I looked at their materials. Apparently, one of there are two parameters to estimate success of their firm. Number one is how many accounts and clients, and number two, how much assets they keep under their administration. So the longer they sit on my asset, which is cash, the more they can declare to their shareholders. We are sitting on so many millions of dollars, or so on and on and on. Once I take in my money back, it decreases ever slightly, but decreases. So they are fighting tooth and nail in order to make sure that I would not get my money back as long as possible. Obviously, if I would go to court and I would initiate the proceedings, sure, I would get my money back. But it will cost me a lot of money and time and so on. So they know all that. They're not stupid. So they're thinking, okay, so we will see it for another month.
But not just you. This is the company policy for everybody trying to make withdrawals.
But they're finding excuses that a corresponding bank is not the same address as the banks that we are sending. Oh, please, could you confirm your address? So I'm sending them my latest credit card statement. I have a Walmart MasterCard, reward card. So I'm sending them. Oh, no. This is not just a regular MasterCard. Credit card. No, it's a reward card. And a reward card we are not accepting. You have to send another card. So it's another day or two because you have to do another screenshot, another. Welcome to the crypto. Go and buy crypto. Everybody, get into crypto.
But it's not just crypto that does that, Sasha, because like I said, I get very frustrated. I'm sure Lee even gets frustrated because a lot of even the social media sites and stuff like that they have these crazy verification things where they get you to send your license or try to copy your license, and half the time they don't accept it even after you've copied it and everything. So I think that
there's nobody to talk to. Also,
there's nobody to talk to. There's like no customer service, and then they want you to make a copy and get it verified and do all these other things. So it takes forever. That's why a couple of folks that I know, myself included, have basically what are dead accounts, because by the time you go through all that hassle, it's not worth it. So they're just off there in the land and nobody's using them. Nobody's actually using the service because it's just kind of out there next to impossible to get to and get fixed, because there's no responsible parties that are involved. And I've seen several folks that have got trapped with that in places as popular as Facebook and Twitter and a number of others that are out there in that space. But just once again, as we get ready to wind down, changing topics once again. We have got a lot of conferences that are going on. You know, everybody's worried about the economy, but there are several world conferences that are taking place, including the Asian conference, the G20 conference, and the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum that is taking place in Bangkok. Should we, as folks in the West, care about all these conferences? Because apparently they're going to be talking about climate change, global inflation, the rise in food price, as well as that war that with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, or is it just going to be a lot of political heads talking at each other and they're going to be saying things that won't really impact us? Or should we be paying close attention to these conferences that are in places like Bali and Phnom Penh and actually paying attention to what politicians are saying? Your thoughts, Lee?
I don't think we have a choice but to pay attention to what they're saying, but also to remember that this is America. You know, I'm not sure. I don't think Sasha would want a one world global government, but there are those who are pushing for it, and that's what some of these conferences are about.
Interesting thought, because it is talk about the divided world and even some of the other wars that are going on, like Myanmar and things of that space. That was actually what I was going to counter to what Dan said earlier. And I don't know that y'all would agree with me, but he was saying that when the United States has, and I'm definitely not knocking the veterans. I have a great deal of respect for veterans and a great deal of respect for America. But to say that we don't have interest in some of those countries that we have been in war in, I think is a little bit disingenuous, because
I think, Mark, I think what he meant was we don't take ownership of it. We don't make it, our a new state or, part of the United States.
No, and I agree with him. I agree with him on that.
We do have armies throughout the world.
Yeah, we have armies throughout the world, and we also do want to get some of their minerals and the things that are in those countries. So,
but I don't think we're co-opting them.
There are some that might argue with that, so I'm not going to take the whole discussion around that. But I mean, that's that whole conversation around the military industrial complex and what we are actually doing in those countries and with those minerals and how we are obtaining those minerals. So that can be a whole other conversation as to whether we are co-opting them or not. Because
maybe we should do a podcast on that.
Yeah, because that could be a whole interesting discussion as to, because I do know some even people like that we've had on the show, like from Uganda and Kenya and other places, they would argue that folks from the West and other places are definitely coming in and grabbing their minerals and sources and bringing them back to
investors or governments.
Governments, not necessarily.
Well, that's the part. Okay,
governments. Yeah, is what I've heard the argument as being, and I'm not saying that I totally believe it, but that is definitely a conversation that has been out there, and that folks might have different belief systems and attitudes about in that lane.
There's something floating in the news today with Elon Musk and Twitter toying with the idea of bankruptcy, which I found a little interesting.
That they're thinking about going bankrupt?
Elon's throwing the idea out there, yeah. Besides laying off a lot of people like Facebook is doing, whether they are financially a stable company.
But would that be a protection move and everything? Because I mean,
I think it's a bargaining thing with him, to get some people some givebacks maybe with salaries or get people to leave. If they're not making money, they're just draining it. Might as well just go bankrupt.
But Sasha, and I've never done a corporate bankruptcy. Actually, I've never done a personal bankruptcy, but I've had friends that have done them. Aren't you in corporate bankruptcy? Aren't you protected from lenders there for a minute? So I'm guessing that's why they're thinking about doing it, because as I recall bankruptcy, I think that you're protected against like your debtors those that you owe money to coming after you. And I think in the personal case, it's like 7 years, but I'm not sure what it is on corporate level. So maybe that's why he's thinking about doing it, because then people can't go after him, if I understand the rules of bankruptcy.
Well, I don't know much about how it's regulated in the United States, and in different states, probably different laws. In Canada, you get temporary protection. Basically, right. What you have to do, you have to, first of all, you have to go to the judge and offer him plan of reorganization. Because if you cannot provide that plan, that the company has to just be dissolved, because it cannot function. Now, if you have a plan of reorganization, which may take 6 months, maybe even 12 months or so, you normally will be granted that time to reorganize the company. First, you will be given protection from your creditors and many other business. So this is really what would happen. It's a reorganization. If it's not, the company has to be dissolved.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking it was. I was thinking it was something along those lines. We've got about 5 more minutes to go, so just going to bring up a couple of other quick issues, and we do have the show that is ready for 11 o'clock, which will be talking about Russia, Ukraine, and China. But Sasha, you'll be interested in hearing this other things I found in the news, and I know that we brought it up on other reports and everything, and of course we can talk about it next week. But apparently, we have 9 years to avoid a catastrophic warming. That is what a new study has come out and said. And I do know that climate change conference is going on, but scientists are saying that there is basically 9 years to get our act together. Otherwise, we will be.
They've been saying that for a while. Al Gore was saying that 20, 30 years ago.
Well, it's kind of like the ones that believe when the end times will be, because there are religious leaders that predict the end times all the time, and then it never actually happens. The chariots and everything else that are supposed to come down. And I'm not saying that it won't happen. It'll happen probably according to the Bible at some point. But I'm always fascinated when people make those predictions, and then they wonder that it doesn't happen. How do you backtrack? I don't even know how you backtrack on something like that, because
they're not held accountable. They just throw them out there, scare people, and walk away.
That's my point. But after they walk away, these different organizations, because there have been several of these in the years.
There's no shame. There's no shame, and there's no accountability.
No accountability whatsoever, and even from some of those leaders in those religious communities, and some of them are extreme, definitely have some fringe beliefs. But I'm going how do you say that, because I know that there have been several cases where they have specifically named a specific date. It's going to be the new millennium or whatever the date is. The date
that's come and gone. Come and gone.
Come and gone. I guess they didn't listen to that one passage that I've always believed from. Well, there's several that I believe from the Bible, but the one that resonates with me is nobody knows the day or time. I forget the exact passage, but it is in that particular religious book, and I am definitely one to believe that we won't know until it actually happens. So
100%. Looking back, right? Just like we don't know our time either.
Exactly. No, a friend of mine actually has a quote about that. His favorite quote is that we all know our birth date, but none of us know our end date. So that is my good friend Ray Pasco's favorite quote. Nobody, no matter what the doctors say, knows the exact end date. We do know the birth date because that's the day we came into this world, but only those above know the actual end date. So that is very much true and all along those lines. But
this is true. This is true. I agree with that. But, our birthdays, we don't know why we're here and for how long. Interesting thought.
Very interesting thought. And I know folks will be following some of the other things going on in the world. I was going to mention just one other world edition, because I do follow things in the climate and all in that space. And of course, we did know about that tropical storm that was hitting the U.S., but apparently there was a major storm that was also hitting a part of the world that does not get a lot of attention, that being Tonga. And apparently a tsunami warning has been issued after a 7.9 magnitude earthquake near Tonga. So that definitely sounds like that would be a lot of destruction and a lot of natural weather kind of things taking place there. So I imagine that there are a lot of people that are facing the consequences of that particular weather event. So definitely prayers and thoughts go out to those folks as well, because I imagine that would be a very devastating earthquake if we're talking 7.9 magnitude and in that space. So definitely my prayers and thoughts go out to them. Any final thoughts that you've got, folks? Otherwise, we're going to hit that lovely banner. And I do know that we've got some other shows coming up at 11 o'clock. We've got the show with Sasha and his folks. And then at 1 o'clock, we've got Jeff Ahern that'll be doing his comedy routine. And he is actually a Republican comedian. He does his show every Friday at 1 o'clock. And then at 2 o'clock, we've got Jeanette Chasworth that'll be talking about interior designing and making your house a good space and all of that. And then at 3 o'clock, we've got Good Ship Happens, which is a conversation around the cruise industry with Cindy Bertram. So, some of us need to get on one of those cruises. So I don't know if you've been on one, Lee. I've only been on one.
No, I
Sasha
have
goes on
not.
all the time because he got it like that.
Rowboat is the closest I've gotten to that. Sasha, I just want to say thank you. Yesterday I jumped on YouTube and I saw you had a chess show going. I was watching that for a little while. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a big scandal in chess world. Tomorrow we will have a broadcast of our show at 3 o'clock. And the lawsuit is initiated for $100 million, and there are 5 defendants. So supposedly it's $100 million for each of these defendants, including world champion Magnus Carlsen, and the biggest, the platform for online chess, which is chess.com. So it would be very interesting. It's about time that I would expect the statement of defense would have to be filed. I'm also interested if the same law firm will represent all 5 defendants, because obviously their responsibility is very different. It's not the same for all 5 defendants. So it will be a very interesting development, and I think it's been on pages of New York Times and Wall Street Journal.
It's a defamation suit.
It's the defamation, it's libel, it's
Right.
Loss of opportunities. There are just the conspiracies. There are a lot of things. And Hans Niemann, the injured party, represented by probably the top law firm in mid-United States, Missouri, and probably one of the top 3, maybe 5 law firms in the United States. So I read Statement of Claim. It's very heavy material there. And I don't think they would take it if they wouldn't believe that there are very, very good chances to succeed.
Yeah, no doubt. But we're going to get on out of here. For folks that are interested in all of those programs that I just mentioned, plus the evening programs, you can catch us now on the web at podtv.tv. So if you're watching and you're catching it on Roku or Amazon Fire, and you want to catch it someplace else, there is continuous programming going on the website, which of course is podtv.tv. So hopefully folks will be checking that out on a regular basis. And of course, don't forget that the day after Thanksgiving will be our award ceremony. It's been 2 years since we've had one, but the Pod TV folks here, myself included, will be having our award ceremony. And who knows, Sasha and Lee may get an award. I don't know yet because they're still making those tabulations and all in that space, but definitely that'll be taking place literally the day after Thanksgiving. So on that note, we're out of here, and we'll
have a good weekend.
World Edition next week, starting on Monday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, Sasha. Bye-bye, Mark. Bye, Sasha.